let's talk about also how you collect data. I mean, it's not just a moment to talk to the patient, right? It's a moment to sit down and say, okay, let's have a look at you. What are your issues? What drugs are you on? And then establish a registry. Do people do this?
Yeah, so we are doing that. I think in all disease states, it's important to learn what is happening in real world, because clinical trials, it's a closed system. It's not real world. So when it's real world, you want to know what is really happening, and you can really look at gaps. And I think it's very important that this information is shared with specialty physicians, with primary care physicians, maybe even to the patients, some of this data and the outcomes, even to the manufacturer, because they are a partner to this.
But let me be a devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Because what you're going to hear, I suspect, when you try to share this data is, well, that's not a controlled study. That wasn't all comers. You didn't control entry into this study. You pointed out that studies are not real world. But by counter example is, real world's not a study.
So, I mean, I just need to correct myself. Clinical trials is not real world. It's still patients, but it's selection of patients, right? There's criteria. You're really trying to look at safety of your product, and then efficacy or non-inferiority. Once it's approved, and now you are prescribing it without any criteria, you're not looking at, okay, this patient, and you're not doing a lot of follow-up and changing, and if they don't take a dose, then maybe they're out of the study. You want to look at what's happening in the real world. So in registry studies, they're still under the umbrella of a study, because you want to enroll them into the registry, and there's informed consent. They're aware they're in a registry, but it's more real world because we want to see what's happening, and we follow these patients 2 years, 3 years, they're still in the registry. You can always look at retrospective if a question arises, or you can look at prospective, and a lot of questions can be answered in registries, and maybe it's not registry of very few patients, but as you get new patients, and it's de-identified.
Okay.
They're all with a unique identification number.
The good news is that the real world evidence for the novel oral anticoagulants and the initial pivotal registration trials are coming together, and they agree with one another. So they're both showing that they have the very narrowly scoped pivotal trials were actually validated by what's coming out of the pharmacy claims database information that we have.
Is it valid though? I mean, it's nice to see that this synchronizes, if you will. But again, isn't there some self-selection here? Those that don't seem to do very well or don't like these drugs, they sort of drop off, and it's not as well controlled as a double-blind, placebo-controlled.
In real-world registries, there's different ways of keeping a registry, right? So you can even look at another control arm where they're not part of the registry, but you can look at what's happening. Or you could have in the registry an intervention arm where you explain, you give them education, and another arm where you don't give much education and you see what's happening. So there's different ways that you can design these registries.
Yeah, and the good news about the future is that, without going into too much detail, now that we have artificial intelligence and machine learning, the way we study medications in real world is going to change, because now we have the ability to obtain data in a way that is faster and accurate, truly reflecting what's happening on a daily basis. Once you put and you can put thousands of big data together, you can merge systems, and then you come up with a lot of protocols based on that data.
Yeah, so I agree with that. And it's also important because there's so many different NOACs out there, right? And with different names, fancy names. But then I think for a primary care physician or a patient, it's important to know what are the difference, or what are the, why am I not on that drug and why am I on this drug? And I think having that real world, we can follow patients and say, these patients were on this drug. So it's not drug specific. What's happening with these patients? And also, maybe some of the manufacturers, I'm hoping, or some health systems can really create some care pathways, help create care pathways. And now you can identify these patients and say, this is what is good for this patient. And so the manufacturers or the health systems or the payers' involvement is very key if we really want to,
It's
you know.
key,
Yeah.
but are the drug manufacturers really interested? They got FDA approval. They're out there. There's drugs in the real world. Do they want to hear back from you?
So
really?
very
I
good.
mean, really?
Yeah, okay, so very good question. What I'm seeing, maybe in the past I wasn't paying attention to that so much, but what I'm seeing recently because of the whole value-based medicine and accountable care organization, I think manufacturers are now becoming more interested. At least they're showing more interest in saying, how can we be part of it? How can we support that? How can we be one team at the end of the day?
But doesn't that cost the manufacturer money? Especially if you're giving him stuff that he doesn't want to hear?
Not too much money.
I mean, why? I mean, what are you trying to say?
Otherwise, they won't make any money, right? If they,
Yeah, no, this helps
so-
them. This helps them
It does.
seek a larger market. So,
Yeah.
so the information that we develop together will definitely pay off for them more than they're spending to get it.
Okay, well, if I understand correctly, they're not spending much to get it at all, because they're not really funding that, are they?
You know, they don't fund, at least when we work with organization, it's really an internal question. Now, for us, we want to know, how can we educate our physicians better so we have the knowledge? How can we really look into our data? So it's really for work that we are doing together, and I think the manufacturer is interested. How can they help this message?
Okay.
Yeah, for
But-
physicians and patients.
But you've
Yeah.
developed this internally,
Yes.
right? And you're going to follow your patients and keep some sort of database.
Yes,
And you're going to change and modify your practices based on what you see.
yes.
Then, one day, somebody says, oh, the light bulb went on. Let's take all this and fold it in 3 pieces, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and say, send it to the manufacturer. Do they want to get it?
You know, I mean, the way you packaged it, it looked really good. But I think for the manufacturer, it's more, what I'm seeing is they're very interested in knowing the burden of the illness, very interested where the gaps are. So there's de-identified data or information or write-ups or abstract, or we can do a publication based on, you know, the study that we're doing in collaboration.
So they are
Yeah,
interested.
they are
They
interested.
are.
I am seeing that more and more manufacturers and health systems and providers are coming together for the first time because everybody knows that we can't do it alone.
You know, I must say, I've been in the medical business a long time. I've talked to lots of manufacturers. I've talked to lots of doctors. And this demonization of one group versus another group
Yeah.
doesn't do anybody any good.
No.
Right? Aren't we all on the same page? I don't want to just join hands and sing kumbaya here, but the drug manufacturers don't want to hurt anybody. They would like their drugs to work. And they'd like to know how best to do that.
Yes.
So they should be interested. Is that your experience?
Yes, the data is or will be out there. So you have to be part of that system if you want to be moving along with the system. Otherwise, you're going to be isolated. Because the fact that you don't participate in the process doesn't mean the data won't be there.
It's coming whether you're ready
Yes.
for it or not, so you might as well get on the train.
Correct.
Huh?